We are covering what is the first major ousting of a Trump White House official in the young second term that we're here living through. It's the security official who uncorked a breach by adding outsiders to a government group message discussion on the app Signal. It's a big deal. You probably remember hearing about it. Well, he's been relieved of that security post. Michael Waltz out as National Security Advisor. That is, of course, a key role typically held for, well, longer than 100 days, typically for years, by seasoned national security vets. This move is Trump's first major senior staffing change of the second term, coming just 48 days after Waltz first released internal discussion of war plans through that app. Many experts said it was a fireable offense at the time. It drew magazine covers, kind of reflecting and really mocking what was seen as an amateurish mistake, playing with larger risk. National security experts said that mistake literally made the United States more vulnerable to massive foreign cyber attacks. Today's move shows how the lingering scandal and the heat ultimately proved too much, at least for the official to be in this post in the Trump administration.
Editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, Jeffrey Goldberg, says he was accidentally texted war plans.
I don't know anything about it. I'm not a big fan of The Atlantic.
So the person that I thought was on there was never on there. It was this
Who
guy.
was that? What person?
Well, I'm not. Look, okay. Laura, I take responsibility.
Trump said it'll never happen again, and from now on, they'll only talk about war plans over Snapchat.
The White House and the president's national security team doubling down on efforts to shift blame surrounding that Signal chat debacle.
Mike Waltz, I guess he said he claimed responsibility. I don't think he should apologize. I think he's doing his best.
Maybe he was doing his best. The verdict is that it wasn't good enough. And so those early defenses, nothing to apologize for at all, have melted into a version of what passes for accountability, even if it comes with spin and is partial. Waltz is taking another job for the Trump administration in New York, representing America at the UN. No permanent replacement has been named today yet for Waltz, so Secretary of State Rubio will be the temporary backfill. It is the kind of shakeup Trump has sought to avoid, the Times reports. And while the UN can play, of course, important roles, Trump and Republicans have routinely belittled it as something like a world hall monitor. So being sent up to New York to meet with those foreign diplomats outside of the circles of power in Washington is, in a MAGA sense, viewed as a demotion. There are signs Waltz himself heard about this very last minute. He was on the White House grounds, we could see there this morning after doing a TV interview. And after some tough headlines about this change started trickling out, the White House then announced he would take this UN vacancy. There he was today. The Signal breach cost Waltz his job, so it is notable that he was just caught using Signal in an open press gathering of the cabinet again this week. This is a Reuters news photographer who captured his hands, you see there. Now, experienced people know when you go to the open section of the cabinet meeting, the mic is on, it's on the record, as they say, and the cameras and the photographers are quite visibly there. Yet this Reuters photographer was still able to capture him opening his Signal app and including what he lists as apparently real names of high-ranking officials. They're not using code names here. There's references on his phone to what looks like Rubio, Gabbard, and J.D. Vance. You see there. The phone exposed a message from the sender named J.D. Vance, which said he had, quote, confirmation from a counterpart, and, quote, it's turned off. That's what we could read on it. Those are fragments of the communications. They could mean a lot more to certain foreign adversaries who can combine them with other intel. So that was his last cabinet meeting as National Security Advisor. And to be clear, like the security breaches that dogged his now short tenure, it might be remembered more for that kind of sloppy approach to security than the boilerplate statements he made during it, praising the president.
This is leadership at its finest, led by our commander-in-chief who loves the troops and they love him.
We've had 100 days of your leadership with respect, with strength. It's an honor to serve you in this administration, and I think the world is far better, far safer for it.
Whether the world is safer remains to be seen, but the Trump administration's impact on safety and creating safety risks out of whole cloth is what got Waltz ousted so quickly. I mean, again, if you think about these jobs are probably hard to do, but if you just did nothing, you might have had less of an impact than how much he leaked about war plans. Now, another short-lived Trump aide you might remember on your screen there, Anthony Scaramucci. Well, he got in a little jab roasting his fellow MAGA traveler when this news hit today, noting Waltz has now served about 9.2 Scaramucci's as a unit of time for people who don't hold down these jobs very long. Now, that's the tumult inside the White House. And it is just one job, albeit an important one, that reinforces how facts matter. It was the fact of sharing the war plans, covered, documented, sort of can't really spin or deny your way out of that, and then the story lasting, people staying on it, that ultimately changed the staffing. Now, that's just one position, an important one. But it reminds you that while the administration and some of the folks around them say they use their own reality or nothing matters or the press doesn't matter anymore, this was entirely a product of the facts, the reporting, and the sustained pressure. Around the nation, Trump continues to be really facing a souring economy and a trade war that is hurting him. And for all the talk about Republicans who move with lockstep loyalty, that, you know, Ted Cruz will stand by Donald Trump once he won and never push back, and Trump has benefited from that type of support at times, it's also notable right now that Donald Trump has picked a giant fight that's still going on with a right-leaning group that isn't rolling over. I'm talking about financial conservatives and Wall Street and people involved in all that work because they're alarmed over the costly tariffs that are driving the economy down, shrinking gross domestic product, which is a warning sign for a possible recession. Fox News' sister outlet, the New York Post, skewering Trump today for hiking toy prices with his tariffs and then trying to minimize it all. Skimp on the Barbie is how the front page is mocking the president. And it is still the economy stupid, as James Carville memorably put it. And the point there is not just that the economy can drive election outcomes, it's that the economy just sets the baseline mood. In boom times, people may look the other way. But when things go bust, like they have under these tariffs, the nation takes a more skeptical look at its government. And people are now hearing facts about Trump's stumbling 100 days, which is clearly driving opposition, as I mentioned, in conservative media like the Post, in financial quarters, and then really across the country here. These are really stunningly negative underwater results for Donald Trump. You look at this on your screen, we are a long ways from his November comeback, underwater in all major polls, down 11% in Fox News. So that's the temperature. Then there's the political thermostat, because we are in a dynamic process. There are those who think you should just give up or tune out, and it's a free country, you could do that. But there are others, like the signs we see at some of these protests today, this one in Michigan, you voted for democracy, not dictatorship, that are trying to summon the moment to build something larger. In California, we saw a sign that simply says, "We, the people, deserve better." Thousands were seen gathering in Boston, in Washington, in San Francisco, and Chicago. These are new rallies, so if you're watching live on television or on YouTube, you're seeing things that are happening now. Today's news, but it might look familiar because over the last several weeks, we've covered a bunch of similar scenes. Smaller groups in small towns, some of them in conservative and red states, larger gatherings in the large cities, of course. It's a pro rata, per capita type thing, but this keeps happening. More of a groundswell than we've seen in most administrations' early periods. The shrinking economy also drawing comparisons to a very memorable Seinfeld episode featuring George Costanza. So Jimmy Fallon brought this up on Late Night, discussing Trump's trade war leaning to economic shrinkage, to that shrinking GDP I mentioned, and likening it to George's troubles.
It shrank. Trump was like, well, it was the 3 coldest months. Of course, there was shrinkage.
Yes, the U.S. economy is undergoing what economists refer to as a George Costanza.
You can see the shrinkage got everybody thinking. But the joke only works, especially in mass late-night shows, if everybody is in on the punchline. A lot of folks watch late night, including people rooting for Trump, including Republicans or conservatives and what have you. But the facts still matter. And if you dare to tell people that the economy is not shrinking, that the trade war is working, you are going to run right into the brick wall, which Trump has run into in this polling I showed you, because people are living it.
And that's not what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do for Donald Trump's trade war. Today, Donald Trump found himself drowning in the fallout from his own demand that the American people make do with less so that he can raise tariffs, those tariffs that are damaging our economy and our standing in the world. A wave of brand new reporting suggests that there's more Trump-inflicted pain to look forward to. We played Donald Trump's comments for you here yesterday, but it bears repeating because the candidate who promised day in and day out on the campaign trail that he would lower prices on day one is now telling all of us out loud, too bad, you're going to have to pay more. Watch.
Somebody said, oh, the shelves are going to be open. Well, maybe the children will have $2 instead of $30, you know? And maybe the $2 will cost a couple of bucks more than they would normally.
Maybe the shelves will be open, empty. Oh, well. Here's the cover of the normally Trump-friendly New York Post. It says it all. Take a look at this. Skimp on the Barbie. Trump admits tariffs will raise some prices, cause shortages. Barbie shortages. That's what we're getting with Trump 2.0. Trump's comments on Wednesday capped what has been weeks, actually months, of Donald Trump's millionaire and billionaire stacked cabinet downplaying, if not outright dismissing, the real anxiety this creates and the pain caused by the Trump administration policies.
Access to cheap goods is not the asset, is not of the American dream.
Americans who want to retire right now, the Americans who have put away for years in their savings accounts, I think they don't look at the day-to-day fluctuations.
Let's say Social Security didn't send out their checks this month. My mother-in-law, who's 94, she wouldn't call and complain. She just wouldn't. She'd think something got messed up, and she'll get it next month.
The armies of millions of people. Well, remember, the army of millions and millions of human beings screwing in little screws to make iPhones. That kind of thing is going to come to America.
No, it isn't. There are no screw-making assembly lines coming to America. And people who look at their balances and their savings and their retirement, that's everybody. That's all of us, all the time. And skipping a Social Security check if your 94-year-old mother is your mother, I'm guessing it doesn't hurt. What are they talking about? And now, the war on Christmas. Trump telling the country's children there will be fewer toys to look forward to this year. New York Times reports this, quote, this Grinchy pronouncement by the president had the value of being truthful. Many American toy makers and retailers have started to pause their orders as the effects of Trump's tariffs ripple out, threatening to snarl supply chains. It could all have a big impact on this year's holiday season, since it takes months to manufacture, package, and ship many products to the U.S. But the impacts are expected to be felt sooner than that. NBC News is reporting this, quote, President Donald Trump's massive China tariffs are jeopardizing American fireworks shows, threatening to drive up prices and limit supplies. U.S. fireworks wholesalers and distributors say they've been canceling shipments from China for this year's 4th of July holiday. Some are also halting manufacturing in China of fireworks for next year's celebrations of the 250th anniversary of America's independence. Donald Trump asking Americans to put up or shut up with the consequences of his economic policies is where we start today with some of our most favorite reporters and friends. CNBC senior economics reporter Steve Liesman is back. Also joining us, publisher of The Bulwark, host of the Focus Group podcast, Sarah Longwell's here. And with me at the table, U.S. financial commentator for the Financial Times, writer of the Unhedged newsletter, Robert Armstrong is back with us. Steve Liesman, I start with you. There was a moment in our conversations when the only data point we had was the market going up or down. We now have the thing that I feel like you and I have been gnawing at since this all began, and that is the real world consequences. People having to make very difficult choices about what their families can afford around the holidays, things that you can see and feel. And it's almost comedic, but ruining the 4th of July?
Yeah, well, these things are probably going to happen. There is some inventory in the country right now. It's pretty interesting what happened. The reason that GDP report was negative was because there was this influx of imports, which are subtracted from the total growth numbers. So there is some inventory around. When it actually hits, there's an expectation. If you look at the maps of the ships not being in the ports right now, you can be pretty sure that it's going to happen. And then you're going to get, I believe, some increase in prices because either the tariffs will be piled on or there'll be a scarcity of certain goods. I don't think that this is escapable at this point because of the supply chain time it takes to order something, have it made in China and bring it to the United States. It's not as if over some period of years, Nicole, we could probably work this out. But the idea of slapping these 145% tariffs on and really quite sizable tariffs on other countries outside of China means that the global supply chain that companies have been working for a couple decades now has been pretty massively disrupted to the point where you may not even know what your tariff's going to be. There's something called bonded warehouses, Nicole, that I would offer you as a piece of interesting economic insight here. And that's a place where products go before they have to be pay tariffs on. They're kind of, it's like a storage area. That's a kind of, it's not in the country yet. And these bonded warehouses are full. And if the tariffs remain, that stuff may be sent back, because if you're a retailer and you ordered something for 100, well, now it's going to cost 245 or something along those lines. And so you may not be able to pay for it. You may send it back. So we are in a deep purgatory here, a deep uncertainty. And tomorrow we'll get the jobs report, and we might get the first inkling of how this is affecting jobs in America.
I have some reporting from a neighborhood toy store of exactly what you're describing from the owner of a toy store in a real neighborhood serving real people that live there. I want to ask you, though, a question about whether we're at a point now where we might have a recent historical parallel. I mean, when the COVID pandemic hit, there were supply chain crises, right? I mean, everyone remembers the run on toilet paper and whatnot, but that was a global pandemic, and there were things to point to, and in the end, people did blame Donald Trump's handling, but there was something tangible to explain it. Is there any story that the White House could manufacture to explain these goods sitting in warehouses and not coming here because the prices are either unknown or too high, which sounds like what you're articulating, other than what Trump has done with his inexplicable, arbitrary, and chaotic tariff bonanza?
Well, he tried yesterday to blame the stock market on Biden, and I think there was a lot of laughter around Wall Street, I think, on that one. I think that people pretty squarely put this on the shoulders of President Trump. You're right, though. Economists are calling this what is known as a supply shock. You can go back to perhaps the 70s with the oil price shocks. That was a supply shock, and the pandemic as well. You know, what's interesting about this, and I'm sorry, but a little bit worrisome in this score, score here, is that most recessions end up being ones of demand. People can't afford things because they lose their job. This supply shock is not easily handled through the normal tools that we handle downturns in, which is that you end up trying to get people to buy more. But if the problem is that there's not enough stuff and people are losing their jobs because of that, goosing demand is not going to help. And there's a second element to this that is more worrisome to me, which is that the normal circuit breaker on this tends to be government spending. And what's happening with government spending, that's coming down at the same time you have the supply shock. So we could be in for a twofer here over time.
We have some exciting programming news to share. This Saturday, 6 p.m. Eastern, MSNBC will be premiering a brand new show, appropriately titled The Weekend Primetime. It's on the weekends in primetime. It will be hosted by four very familiar faces from this network: my good friend Ayman Mohyeldin, Antonia Hilton, Catherine Rampell, and Elise Jordan, and is gearing up for its great first broadcast. I'm joined now by two of those familiar faces, Elise Jordan and Catherine Rampell. It's good to have you both here. I feel like I had you both on Up maybe at this table like 13 years ago, possibly.
Well, and you know what I've said so many times? I've said, up with Chris Hayes as a model. We need to do it because it really, do you remember, you would bring us in, it would be a super smart, wonky topic. We'd spend 20 minutes on it, and everyone left smarter, and it became and look at you now.
Well, it's true.
You are responsible for the rest of your career.
I am happy for that. I want to ask you, Elise, I want to start on the Walz news today, because you actually worked in the National Security Council, which is this strange entity in the government that people outside know nothing about, but then as soon as you get into the White House and the government, it turns out to be basically the most important part of the government.
Well, think about how unwieldy everything is now and how many different intelligence apparatus we have and different government-seeking missions here and there. And that is the one organ that coordinates it all within government. And so you have to be so detail-oriented. It is a time drain. You are overseeing and you're making everyone get along, too. And you're solving all these interagency problems. So now Marco Rubio is expected to do that and to run the State Department, which kind of has a lot going on around the world, too.
Yeah, Ben Rhodes, who we talked to earlier, who had been a deputy at the National Security Council, was like, this is ridiculous. He can't do it. He also is the acting administrator of aid, which they're trying to cut, and also National Archives, just to throw that in. But as someone who did work in there, do you agree with Ben that it's ludicrous to have him have both these jobs, National Security Advisor and Secretary?
It makes absolutely no sense when there are plenty of Americans, plenty of national security experts who could fill such a role. It shows, though, I think, how Trump is relying on such a small brain trust for foreign policy. Is it really going to be Marco Rubio at the end of the day who he's relying on? It remains to be seen. Marco Rubio's foreign policy views were diametrically opposed to Donald Trump.
Like completely the opposite in every way.
Exactly. And how do you flip from being a pro-democracy, human rights supporter, very gung-ho for foreign intervention, to now just quietly going along with Trump?
I want to ask you, Catherine, about this great bit of reporting from Rolling Stone today about the tariffs and about preparations that are happening. I'm sure this has happened to you and people you know, that people have been like front loading their consumption.
I'm hearing from newly evolved preppers and hoarders.
Yes, exactly. Yes. And it has a little bit of that texture of the early COVID days of like, oh, go get all the paper towels. So this is a great bit of reporting in Rolling Stone. 2 Trump administration officials and a Trump aide tell Rolling Stone they have done some stockpiling of their own in recent weeks or months. They know others working in Republican politics inside and outside the administration who are doing the same. One of the Trump officials says they have already run to Target to bulk buy toilet paper, some types of food, other household supplies. When asked why they're doing this, a Trump aide who says they and their partner have done similar household hoarding lately are also stashing cash reserves in their D.C. area home simply replies, because it would be stupid not to.
Well, to be fair, DOJ has also been responsible for toilet paper shortages at some of the federal agencies.
Oh, that's true, yes, because they cut off some contracts.
So I think we've talked about this before. So even without the tariffs, people might be worried about their paper products.
But in this case, like again, all of this is so strange because we're in this period of uncertainty because of the lag that happens with supply chains. So we're all kind of pacing out what this is going to be. There was a bunch of bulk ordering that happened. We got the first ship today, sort of arriving, I think, the last ship that's like pre-tariff.
Yeah.
But it does seem like we're going to experience some real consumer disruption.
Yes, absolutely. Not only because prices are likely to go up, but because we're going to have vacant shelves probably pretty soon. A lot of the stocking up that's happened has happened with these durable goods, things that are not perishable, right? Washing machines or furniture or things like that. The real pain that's going to come sooner is going to be on things that companies can't stock up on, like groceries, right? So for whatever reason, Donald Trump put a new tariff on tomatoes, Mexican tomatoes, quite recently. So that will have an effect. It will show up very soon at the grocery store. So consumers are going to feel this pretty quickly. With regard to that Rolling Stone article, I wish these staffers, these anonymous aides in the Trump administration would tell Trump that they are doing this, right? Because he has completely dismissed all of these concerns.
Well, and this is something that unites both, I think, the tariff, trade war, domestic policy, and foreign policy. You know, it really does seem there is, you know, the whole value proposition of all these people around Trump this time around was there's no one to tell him no. He doesn't like being told no. We're seeing what it looks like when no one tells him no. Sometimes he backs off stuff. But that is the kind of unifying thread here, that there's no one telling him you can't do that.
Well, and also just the nonsense that's put in his brain every day. I mean, we've
Right.
all read about Natalie Hart following him around with the printer and how he doesn't even really get mainstream media that he actually loves and he wants to do interviews with. He doesn't see it. And so
Right. It's a garbage in, garbage out
Exactly,
situation.
exactly.
I mean, where the origins of the garbage are a little unclear. I think sometimes they are coming from outside his brain into it. Sometimes they're coming from inside his brain out into the world. Like the tariff stuff that's like him.
Yes.
100%.
Yeah, well, yes, he has loved tariffs. He's been a tariff man since at least the 80s. He's obsessed with tariffs. He doesn't know why he's obsessed with tariffs. Maybe it's because of the revenue. Maybe it's a negotiating ploy. Who knows? All of these objectives are at odds. I think it's also whoever has his ear most recently who may be acting in their own self-interest, right? There are plenty of people who stand to get enriched because of this administration's policies if they can get in touch with Donald Trump at the right time.
Maybe someone can make the case against the trade war to Laura Loomer, and then we can get it via Laura Loomer.
That's how you nailed it.
Could tell the president, Elise Jordan and Catherine Rampell. Thank you both. Be sure to watch the premiere of The Weekend primetime this Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern right here on MSNBC.
And I want to start by introducing some of the folks that are in the room tonight.
Please do.
Let's start with Brittany Coleman. Brittany was an attorney for the Office of Civil Rights at the Education Department. Then there's Carrie Murphy, who worked at the Commerce Department. Alyssa Ellman is a disabled Army veteran who has let go from her job at the Buffalo Veterans Affairs Office. Sam Peterson was a park guide for the National Park Service. And Tamara May spent 21 years in government service, working her way up at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And that is where we begin tonight. Tamara, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Let's talk a little bit about the job that you have at the at the CDC. You were working specifically on birth defects and developmental disabilities, how to support families who need extra help due to certain rare genetic conditions like sickle cell anemia. This was mandated by a bipartisan group in Congress. Did you ever think that it would be abolished entirely?
No, I never did. There are 71 million people in this country with a disability. So I truly believe that, I don't want to use the word safe, but I believe that, as you said, because it was a bipartisan group, that everyone understood the importance of the work we did. And we were one of the smallest centers at CDC. And so we focused very heavily on impact because we didn't have a large budget. So we focused on impact and really meeting the needs of the audiences that we served.
And an impact you made. I know it's important to you as someone who suffered a debilitating injury from a natural gas explosion. For people out there that are watching us tonight, to see people working for the federal government who have faced and live with disabilities. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. When my accident happened, it was devastating to me. I was in the hospital for a year. I fought really hard to go back to work because it was always important to me to serve the people of this country. And I think that's one of the things that's really upsetting to me is because I truly believe most federal workers, all federal workers that I've ever known, are in it because we want to serve this country. So I went back to work and every day was difficult for me from a health perspective, but I did it because of what we do.
You know what? And it matters to the American people. Thank you, Tamara. Thank you so much. Everybody give it up for Tamara. Thank you so much. Thank you. Sam, stand up. Sam was a park guide at the National Park Service. Sam, you were at the Roosevelt National Recreation Area in Oregon. You were down at the Jimmy Carter National Historic Park. You served during his funeral. Is that right?
Yeah, it was an extreme honor for me. Before being in the Park Service, I'd been a high school history teacher, and like so many park rangers in the Park Service, just in love with the idea of America and our history and our treasures. So it was an honor for me.
So from history teacher to Park Service employee, you don't want to quit on public service, do you?
No, I truly believe that America is the best country on earth, and I believe the American people deserve to have a country that, supports them and that is available for them, that they deserve to be educated or to see the amazing vistas at the Grand Canyon or Yellowstone.
Which is why it's such a shame, unfortunately, that you took a job outside the federal government. Even though they offered for you to be reinstated, it was too late. You think you'll go back ever to the federal government?
Well, being a park ranger was my dream job. I sure would love to someday. I wasn't able to because of our specific circumstances. I had to move 6 hours away. I was living in government housing when I got fired, so I had to move. Like I said, it's a dream job, so I'd love to go back someday.
Let's get you back in the federal government, okay? Sam, thank you so much. Really
Sam,
appreciate you.
Before you go, what do you think the park experience could be like for Americans this summer? This is what Americans and people from all over the world like to do for their summer vacations.
Yeah, so I would predict that Americans are going to see an impact at their parks. They might not. And if they don't, it's not going to be sustainable. They might see overflowing trash cans and overflowing restrooms. Just today, actually, the America the Beautiful Act was introduced to Congress. So if they don't want to see impacts in their parks, they should call their congressperson and they should support this legislation because it could go a long way to help their parks.
Sam, thank you so much. Alyssa, let's hear from you. Thank you so much for being here, Alyssa. You were working at the Buffalo Veterans Affairs Office in the Education Department, and I want everybody to know not only are you a cancer survivor, potentially because you were exposed to burn pits in Afghanistan, but you went into the VA even though you probably could have made the same amount of money working, accepting disability payments. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And so tell me, why did you decide to go into the federal service and go to the VA?
I decided to do it because I really care about veterans. I love to work. I didn't want to feel like I was stagnant and staying home. I wanted to give back to a system that has given me so much. Doctors at the VA treated my cancer, saved my life. Thank you, Dr. Ryan. But they were great for me, and I haven't had... I've really benefited from these systems, and I wanted to be able to do something that was impactful, even if it was small, in order to give back to it.
Let me tell you something. You're doing something impactful right now, and you're also doing something very brave because you were told you could have your job back, but if you spoke out to media, you couldn't. And here you are tonight speaking out in front of all of us. I want to say all of you are very brave, but in particular, what you were faced with. Why did you decide to come and speak out tonight instead of take your job back?
I feel like this is a critical time in our country. I love America. I love being from this country. I've traveled the world. There is no greater system than what we have here. And I feel like it's just so very important to talk about not just myself, but my coworkers who work so hard to provide benefits, even when it's inconvenient, even when federal systems break. We work overtime. We exceed our production numbers on a regular basis. And to characterize us as terrible people or people who are lining their pocket with federal dollars is a lie.
You were producing.
How does that make you feel when you hear that?
It makes me really angry. I feel terrible because, I'm in a really unique position where I don't really need this job, but there are a lot of people who I work with who this is the money that they pay their mortgage with. This is the money that puts their children into sports. They're afraid to talk. They're afraid to talk because they really want their jobs back. This is their primary source of income. These people work really hard. The idea that we don't have any accountability for our job is a lie. We have to provide production numbers that we can't fake. They're looking at our computers for every single thing that we do during the day. And it's wrong to talk about employees who are working really hard for you and doing their best to provide these services in that way.
In a productive way. The thing I've heard over and over, Steph, time and time again, is that on their performance reviews, these performance reviews ultimately were positive for all of these. How many of you got a positive performance review, just out of curiosity? There you go.
Wow.
There's your answer. Let's get the camera around. Well, keep your hands up, please. If you had a positive performance review, raise your hand. Yeah. Thank you very much. I appreciate you talking to us. Thank you very much. Carrie, I want to make sure to get you in here. You were an administrative officer for the CHIPS operation inside the Department of Commerce. Tell me what CHIPS is.
CHIPS is bringing the manufacturing of semiconductors back into the United States.
Wait. Isn't that what President Trump said he wanted to do?
That's why I thought I was safe. That and the fact that, they were saying we're just going to get rid of waste, fraud, and abuse. And the mission that we were assigned to do was not that.
Then how do you feel, right? When you watch the administration every day talk about we're going to bring jobs back, we're going to bring manufacturing back, when that's exactly what you were working on?
That's exactly. And the colleagues I was working with, shout out to all of them. We were a very small group, but the most brilliant, hardworking people. And that kind of piggybacks off of what Alyssa said. It's like we're getting a rap of... I ran into someone the other day, my neighbor, and she said, why didn't you just want to go back to work? And I said, what do you mean? And she said, well, aren't the people that are getting fired either poor performers or those that chose not to go back when we were mandated to go.
It's not what it looks like in this room tonight, is it?
That's not the truth.
Yeah. Carrie, it's all kind of dizzying, too. So many of these people. How many of you have been fired, reinstated, and fired again, or some version of that? Yeah. There you go. One more time for everybody. Hands up high, please. Fired, reinstated, and then fired again. It's all very dizzying. How do you understand sort of the disorder of this process?
You can't understand, because every day you're wondering, is today the day I lose my job? Is today the day I get my job back? Do I have insurance each day? That's a whole nother issue that we're running into now. So you can't.
Yeah, there are so many stories, just like insurance. It's one of them. And I thank you so much for sharing yours. Brittany, let's get you in here. Brittany, you were an attorney in the Office of Civil Rights in the Department of Education. You were doing compliance type work with anti-discrimination, disability laws, disenfranchised communities to make sure they have access to available sources of financial assistance. Who's going to serve those families now?
Well, we've lost about 50% of our staff because of these cuts. So I can say for my office, the Office for Civil Rights, we went from having 12 regional offices down to 5.
From 12 to 5.
That's correct.
And one of the things about your story that I found so compelling is that you said you were once in the shoes of the people you served.
Absolutely. I mean, I was once a student in school who wanted to make sure that I had opportunities. I applied for federal student aid. I wanted to make sure that I was treated fairly, and my parents did at times have to go to the school and advocate for me. This is what our office is for, is that when people need to advocate for their children, or students need to advocate for themselves, that they have an avenue and an advocate that will look into, well, a neutral party, I should say, who is an advocate for enforcing the laws of our nation and making sure that everyone is treated fairly.
And that was you.
That's correct.
So right now, if folks were in your position as a student and they need help and they would want to reach out to your former office, what do they do? Who do they call?
Well, my office, the Dallas office, is one of the 7 offices that was closed. So unfortunately, the workload has now been shifted to the Kansas City office. But you have to keep in mind that that staff is now dealing with what was already hard enough to deal with 50 cases per person. They're now dealing with 300 to 350 cases.
300 to 350 cases.
That's correct.
And so that type of workload, Brittany, is inconceivable, I would imagine, to people in your line of work.
It's unsustainable, but it's not just penalizing us, it's penalizing the students because they're having to wait for us to get to their cases for relief when they need it.
Well, Brittany, thank you very much for being here. And Steph, I have to say, not only an extraordinary group of people, and not only very sad stories, but at the same time, such inspiring ones. To have everybody be here tonight, be in the same room with us, there's something special going on here, you guys.
Morning Joe economic analyst Steve Ratner has made his way over to the Southwest Wall to break down the various economic indicators that we are seeing, including, Steve, how Americans are feeling about all this.
Yeah, Mika, and the answer is Americans are not feeling good at all. So let's take a look at a couple of the numbers that we do have. So consumer sentiment obviously measures what consumers feel about the economy at a point in time. This gray line going to black here is all Americans put together, and you can see how it's rolled over like that. This is the 4th lowest reading in history since they started taking this survey. It's an interesting thing that I've shown you before, but people switch around based on who's president. Before the election, the Democrats were more optimistic, now less, and vice versa. But even this Republican number, which has gone up a little bit, in Trump's first term, confidence among Republicans was up here. So even Republicans are still a long way from feeling as good about Donald Trump 2.0 as they did about 1.0. No ambiguity about CEOs. CEOs feel like this has just gone off a cliff. This is the lowest reading since 2010 in the wake of the financial crisis. CEOs, and I've been around a lot of CEOs in the last few days, and we talked about it a few minutes ago, they hate the tariffs, but they hate the uncertainty even more. They have no idea how to plan their business. They have no idea what's coming. You're seeing CEOs at the moment releasing their first quarter earnings reports where they normally tell you the outlook for the year, and company after company is saying, we can't tell you the outlook for the year because we don't know.
Steve, I asked this sincerely. Are the CEOs you talk to, are they genuinely surprised by what's happening here? I mean, this is exactly what Donald Trump advertised during the campaign. It's exactly what places like Goldman Sachs predicted, that the economy would be much stronger if Joe Biden were reelected, or excuse me, if Kamala Harris were elected. Are they actually surprised by what they're watching here?
Yeah, Willie, they are, and I think they thought that a campaign is a campaign. People make lots of promises, and then they come in office and do something more moderate, something more like the right thing, and so they're stunned. They are really, literally in a state of shock. They never expected this.
So let's look at your second chart, Steve, which gives us some of the reasons for the pessimism you just laid out, and that's inflation, that's cost of living, that it's just going to get a lot more difficult here this year to get through the day.
Yeah, so prices haven't actually started to go up much yet, but it is coming because as these goods come in and the import taxes are put on them, prices are going to go up. Consumers are terrified. The market itself actually is not quite as pessimistic about inflation, but consumers really are scared. 6.5%, up from under 3% just a couple months ago, the highest since 1981. And so you see that then reflected in something you guys have been talking about, but we'll lay it out here, which are the polls. 39% approval rating for Trump, lowest going all the way back to somewhere before Nixon, maybe LBJ at the height of the Vietnam War, who knows, but for a very, very long time, lower than where Trump was last time at this point, at first 100 days, and actually lower than where Joe Biden was after his first 100 days.
You know, Steve, I just want to go back. You said these CEOs, these captains of industry, these wizards of Wall Street are stunned. They are stunned that Donald Trump is doing what he said he was going to do since 1987, that he's doing what we said he was going to do. We kept warning about, if you like certainty, this is not the way to go. He's going to really, really lean into the tariffs. He said tariffs is the most beautiful word in the English language. How could they have deluded themselves that he was going to come in and be Eisenhower? He never was going to be Eisenhower. He promised them every day on the campaign trail that this is exactly what he was going to do. So how can they sit back going, oh my God, I can't believe he's doing what he said he was going to do since 1987.
Joe, it's a great question. I think there's a combination of reasons, and I'm not here to defend or explain it even, but I'll try to put myself in their head for you. Trump 1.0 had some tariffs, but they were far more modest than this. They caused much less chaos. Politicians say a lot of things on the campaign trail. And honestly, just what Trump has done here with the tariffs is just so far over the top. It just never occurred to them. I shouldn't say never occurred to them. They never believed that we could have 154% tariffs on things from China, meaning effectively those toys will not be on the shelves at Christmas.
So, Steve, moving forward, President Trump said that Biden is also responsible for the future. What is the economic outlook under Trump's second presidency?
Yeah, he said Biden was responsible for what's happened in the stock market and moreover would be responsible for anything else that happens in the stock market.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what happened in the stock market. In Trump 2.0, the stock market is down 7%. That is the worst performance of a stock market in the first 100 days of a presidential term since Nixon's second term in 1973. It is in stark contrast to Trump's first term, when, contrary to what many people expected, the stock market actually went up 5%. And back to Joe's question, because he didn't come out and do all this crazy stuff. But also what is really troublesome for every American, whether you have an IRA or you're an investor, is the volatility. Look at what the stock market did in the course of these 100 days. And compare it to any of these other periods. This is another form of uncertainty, which is unbelievably destabilizing to business. So where does that put us all together? Puts us all together with recession odds going up very, very sharply. We don't yet obviously have data yet on what's happened really in the last little bit, but let's just go back and take a look. There were some fears of recession back in 24 when the Fed was raising interest rates. When Joe Biden left office, you guys have talked over and over again, how about when Joe Biden left office, the economy is growing 2.5%, low unemployment, inflation on its way down, and so recession odds close to zero. Trump comes in, recession odds go up, 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 45 to 40%, Goldman Sachs versus Bloomberg. And then just as a fun fact, on April 9th, Goldman Sachs raised its recession probability to 65% because of the tariffs. 2 hours later, Trump rescinded some of the tariffs or delayed them, and they took that forecast back down to 45%. And this is another example of the volatility and the uncertainty that business hates and just makes their job unbelievably difficult.
All right.
So, Steve, before we let you go, Steve, really quickly, I just want to ask you about you referenced it. This report is a little quirky, just as a caveat, a little quirky because imports flooded in. People were trying to beat the tariffs. That sort of skewed some of the GDP numbers. There's no doubt that the next 2-3 months are looking pretty rocky. But you had mentioned it. Talk about why this reading was a little bit quirky.
Yeah, Joe, it was quirky for a couple of reasons, and it's worth pointing out. First of all, Trump wasn't even president for the whole 90 days. Secondly, it ended on March 31st, and the tariffs came in on April 2nd. But as you said, the key things were that imports came into the country in anticipation of the tariffs. That lowers the GDP, but you also had a bunch of businesses out there trying to make some investments and buy some capital goods before the tariffs. That makes it higher. When you strip it all apart, it does appear that the economy grew by a couple % in the first quarter. But that I would put on Biden. I mean, Biden was the president for a month of that, plus it was his economy that Trump inherited. So I give Biden credit for what was actually not a bad GDP number. We got to look ahead. There was a jobs number yesterday from ADP. We're going to get another jobs number this Friday. But the ADP number that came out yesterday showed roughly half as many jobs being created last month as the month before. So you may start to see some effects of Trump. But looking ahead, it's all bad. There's nothing but gloom out there in the business and the investor community.
Yeah, I mean, that's why again, that we've said it here. The next 100 days will be more telling even than the first 100 days as far as the economy goes. Again, there are a couple of caveats to add to this number. But you look at consumer confidence plummeting, you look at savings rates down, a lot of reasons to be deeply concerned for Americans as we move forward over the next 3 months. Morning Joe economic analyst Steve Rattner. Thank you so much. Caddy.